you never know everything, and you learn something new every day.
Is there somebody, an overlord out there watching us if we don't, if we don't have a buyer broker agreement and we show a property? There's been some changes come up. It's been in the news for a while, talking about the NAR settlement. What is that? Hey everybody, Zach here with Real Estate Revealed, and I'm here with Kevin Kercheval. If you find value in this podcast, and just hit that like button, hit subscribe, so that way you can stay up to date with the things going on in real estate. So, Kevin, I appreciate you coming on and helping me out.
Well, here, Zach.
Appreciate it. So, tell me a little bit about your background and kind of where you are and how long you've been in real estate.
Well, I've been licensed since about 2002. I've always been here at Coldwell Banker in Jonesboro, Coldwell Banker Village Communities. Was a salesperson here for a number of years, executive broker for a number of years, been principal broker for the past, 3 years, and just right here on 2704 South Culver House in Jonesboro, just serving all of Northeast Arkansas.
All right. So, what is the one deal right now that stands out in your mind that's probably your most memorable?
The one deal, the one transaction that was the most memorable
in your head. Yeah, first thing. Or let's just put it this way. How about this year? This year.
The one deal this year that was the most memorable.
And why was it memorable?
Well, you have deals that are positive deals that you feel like you made a difference, and you have deals that are hell on wheels that you're just glad that it got done and it's over with, and it's not occupying that space in your mind anymore. They all share a level of importance to some degree, just because it's, usually when you're dealing in real estate, that deal that's going on for that particular family is the most important thing in their life at the time. It impacts their family, it impacts their time, it impacts their money, and so those are three of the most vital components that are a big deal to most families. And so they're all important in that regard. We had the opportunity earlier this year to serve a veterans rehab company who purchased some property for a large facility that they get to help veterans that are suffering from PTSD and alcohol rehab and things like that. And that was something new for me. I had not worked with a company like that, and they were a very ethical, kind, patient-oriented company. And we actually found them a large piece of land on Crowley's Ridge here right outside of Jonesboro. We were able to get them set up. I really think they're going to be able to make a big difference for the vets in our community that are suffering from things like that. So for this year, that's probably one of my top, just being able to help that facility. So it was a residential transaction, it was a commercial transaction, it was a land transaction. It was all three in one. Had a lot of moving parts, took several months to put together. But at the end of the day, there was just a nice sense of accomplishment. I was happy for them and happy that we got to make it happen here in Northeast Arkansas.
So that's pretty rewarding to have, it's not very often you have a transaction that encompasses, all of the aspects of a land deal, commercial or residential. So I imagine your experience over the years since 2002, allowed you to put that together and help facilitate that.
It's in the real estate business, you learn something new every day. So if you ever think you know it all, the deal that you're working on that day or that afternoon is going to teach you otherwise. Yep. So you never know everything, and you learn something new every day. And I learn things from brand new agents, and I'm blessed to work in an office that has a lot of experience and a lot of brokers that have been in the business even since 1974, some of them, and maybe some of them before that, when you start thinking about David Conrad, Marvin Hinton, Carol Caldwell, some of these guys. So you learn something new every day, but the more you do, the easier it comes to be able to solve the problems that are going to inherently occur over the course of a transaction.
Right. Well, so and since you've been in real estate for as long as you have been, and you've seen obviously and experienced a whole lot in this realm, what we call real estate, there's been some changes come up here in the past. Well, it's been in the news for a while, talking about the NAR settlement, which I'm sure you're full aware of, and the new changes from the Department of Justice. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that means? Exactly just what is that? exactly, just in layman's terms, and I know we don't have to get too deep into it right now, but say if I have no idea what that is, I've never even heard of it, and I say I'm a prospective buyer or seller, how are you going to approach me with that?
Okay, so bottom line is what we're talking about is a Sitzer Burnett case that was out of Missouri, and it was a case that was against the National Association of Realtors. NAR settled the case. They never admitted any wrongdoing, and I agree that there was none. But that being said, as part of the settlement, there are certain terms in that Sitzer Burnett antitrust case that have been applied to the National Association of Realtors. Some are probably good. Some I don't necessarily agree with. The U.S. government and the Department of Justice doesn't really care if I agree with it or not. This is the lay of the land. This is how it's going to be. And so bottom line is a couple major things out of that case. Number one, offers of buyer's broker compensation can no longer be advertised on the multiple listing service. This accomplishes a few things. It keeps the buyer's agent from being able to filter out offers of compensation to say, hey, if I have a buyer, I'm only going to show them ones to pay out a higher fee, and I'm not going to show them the ones to pay out a lower fee. I think there were probably very few agents that ever used that in that regard. But at the end of the day, you can't go on the multiple listing service and see what a seller or a listing firm is offering as buyer's agent compensation on the MLS anymore. So that's one major thing. Number two is that agents have to have a buyer's representation agreement in writing prior to showing a property, and that effectively discloses to a buyer the fee that is going to be paid through the buyer or on behalf of the buyer for brokerage services for that brokerage to represent the buyer. So a lot of other moving parts with that, forms changes, terminology, so on and so forth. But all that being said, those are your two major things. Offers of compensation, no longer on the MLS. They can be on the website, social media. A seller can instruct their agents to do what they want as far as that goes off of a data aggregator. But can't be on the MLS. Number two, you got to have the buyer's rep agreement before you show the property.
So what happens if I don't have that, that broker's agreement, buyer's agreement? If I have somebody, a long-term client, or whomever, and I say, hey, they want to see this property. And I'm like, okay, great. What happens if I don't have that and I show them that property?
Well, you'd be in violation. You'd be subjecting yourself and your broker to possible liability. And so as a result of the settlement and being a membership of the brokerage, it's a member of the National Association of Realtors, you have to have that. So I hope, as far as myself and the agents that are licensed under me, that none of them would go down that road, that they're going to comply with the law of the land and the settlement, get that done on the front end. What would happen if you didn't? You're just, you open yourself up to liability for going against the rules that have been placed on our profession.
So one of the biggest things, I had a podcast last week with a lender, and he said when the new rules and regulations, came into effect September 17th, he said that very next week he had 10 different agents that had contracts, properties closed that did not have a buyer, broker agreement. And he said it was a sad deal because they made zero money on it. They didn't have one, so they weren't able to be compensated. They spent all that time and effort on that, and so it is a big deal. Now, is there somebody, an overlord out there watching us if we don't have a buyer broker agreement and we show a property? Maybe. I don't know. I don't see somebody policing us like that. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty, if you don't have that, you're not getting paid.
If you don't have it, you shouldn't. If you don't have it, there's a good chance you won't get paid. And what happens if you don't have it and you get paid, and then that's brought to light after the fact? I don't know, and I don't want to find out, because we go by the rules, we go by the law in our brokerage. So hopefully that's never a road that we have to go down. So I don't know the answer to that question, and that's the thing is, given the amount of changes that have come down with this, it's a little bit of a learning curve for everybody to some degree. But it's just good old fashioned business. If you do what's right, you take care of your customer, and you just abide by the law, then you shouldn't have a problem.
I like that. Do what's right for the customer. Don't worry about, as long as you're doing what's right for the customer and you're transparent with them and upfront, which I believe that's the whole point of the settlement and why we even are in this position right now is because the lack of transparency by a lot of agents, and maybe even just, one of the things I talked about in our last podcast is that, there is a monopoly on knowledge, and it's our job as realtors and agents to inform our clients and customers so they can make a decision and be as transparent as we can be. I think there's been a lot of, unfortunately, that there's not been a whole lot of transparency going on. It seems to be. Would you agree to that, or is that what you see in your brokerage, or is that just kind of the national picture?
It's I believe in this business, and I believe that 98% of realtors out there are going above and beyond and doing what they can to make a positive difference. They're trying to make a living, but they're also trying to, most of them that I talk to in this brokerage and even at competing brokerages deeply care about their clients. At the same time, they deeply care about, making a living, and that's why they're in the business. Ron Kelton taught us years ago at Kelton Real Estate School back in the early 2000s. He said, guys, you put the buyer and seller's best interest first, and the money takes care of itself. That's always been true. It always will be true. That precedes Sitzer Burnett, and it'll come after it. And that's just how the business works.
I got you. So how long have you been? You've been in real estate, I believe you said 2002. How long have you been the broker of Coldwell Banker Village Communities there in Jonesboro?
I was an executive broker. Probably back, and you're aging me a little bit because I don't remember yesterday sometimes, but probably 2014, 2015.
Okay.
I got an associate broker's license first, became a supervising broker, probably 14 or 15. Sue McDonald Taylor was a wonderful principal broker that we hired in 16, and still with us right now. Still works here at the firm as an executive broker, and she and I kind of swapped spots back in probably not long after COVID.
So safe to say you've been managing and heavily influenced in the brokers there for quite some time. So with all this going on with the NAR settlement and the Department of Justice, what steps are you planning to take to ensure that your agents are fully informed and compliant with the new requirements?
Well, there's two things. There's what we have done, and there's what we will do.
Okay.
And so we've known that was coming down the pipe for a while, and that court case has actually been in the court for years and years. But until the proceedings were done, the settlement was made, and that was announced, we knew this was coming down the pipe. So we started talking about this in our weekly sales meeting every week, in our Wednesday morning trainings, pre-sales meeting every week for a long time before this ever got here. Now, as far as the Arkansas Realtor Association, I think they have done an excellent job on the updates to the forms. Would have been nice to have gotten them a little earlier than a few days before the date. I know there were reasons for that. I'm not blaming them. I know the people that were on that risk reduction committee that produced those forms went above and beyond, in my opinion. But we didn't get the updated forms until a few days before D-Day, which was basically August 17th. That was the date where enforcement became mandatory. And so we trained on everything that we could. Here's the cool thing. Arkansas was one of 14 states in the United States that already had buyer's rep agreements. So at Coldwell Banker here in Jonesboro, we've used buyer's rep agreements for as long as I can remember. Did we use them in the exact same capacity that we are, post Sitzer Burnett? Not exactly, but we used them a lot in the same way. And in fact, with the work you've done, Zach, with the work with a lot of the other agents that are a little more progressive and insightful and seeing this coming down the pipe, we've had a lot of agents that have been using these for a long time, in this way. Now we have other folks that the mindset of an agent that's been in the business for years and years is, well, I don't want this buyer to feel like I'm forcing them to work with me. and I've known them forever, and I don't like, putting this in front of them, making them sign this, and making them feel like they're forcing them to work with me. That was the old mentality of the hesitation on using a buyer's rep agreement. Now, our office has required that in a closing document for any buyer that we represented for as long as I can remember. Now, lots of states, California, and lots of even bigger states didn't even have a buyer's rep agreement, or they never used it if they had it. So Arkansas and Tim Groom's, the ARA, our buyer's rep agreement didn't have to change a whole lot to comply with this settlement for the way that we're doing business now. So it really wasn't a huge change in the forms and the terminology and the things that we were used to. The only difference was having to have it signed before you show the property.
So there's a pretty big, you mentioned Arkansas being one of 14 states that have, we've been using, buyers agents, agreements for a while now. Do you think Arkansas and those other 14 states, would you say they are better equipped and better prepared? There's a lot of talk. The consensus is that because of these changes, there might be a lot of agents, leave the market, leave the workforce, just because of the new changes, because they're unable to adapt. Do you see that Arkansas having that as a state, or even your brokerage having, that impact? Do you worry about that?
Certainly possible. It's not necessarily something that we're worried about. As long as I've been in the real estate business, existing producing brokers always kind of hope that the agent population may dwindle a little bit, because you've got full-time professional producing agents, and the trend of the business is there's always been, part-time and semi-retired agents that do less business. So the busier agents always think, oh, this is going to thin the herd, and well, we'll take the market share. That's possible. I don't necessarily think it'll be at the magnitude that a lot of people have expected. Not in Arkansas, and particularly not in a mid-sized, semi-rural market like Northeast Arkansas, just simply because, it's we're a slow and steady wins the race market. And now what may happen in Little Rock, Fayetteville, and the larger markets in Jonesboro that are larger than us, or Memphis, or Austin, Texas, Nashville, I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. There could be some that drop out. We just don't know at this point. And there could be. I still, as a broker, have agents calling me to interview on a, maybe at least a weekly basis. Sometimes not every week, but a lot of times every week, saying, "Hey, I'm going to real estate school, going to pass my test." And the great advantage that these new agents coming into the business are going to have is their mindset is not skewed by what would Kamala Harris say? What has been? It's not hindered by what has been. I don't know.
Well, they don't have the bad
that out if you want to.
The bad habits. Yeah.
They won't have the bad habits that I have, or that you have.
Yeah.
Of how we did business. That I'm sitting in my office, and John and Jane Doe call me and say, "Hey, Kevin, we're in the driveway of this house. Can you come show it to us right now?" And I just pop in there, open the lockbox, show them the house, and we become best friends and selling the house. That ship has sailed. And so if they're not comfortable with not being able to do that, then yeah, maybe they'll go by the wayside. But I think most agents, being smart people, being professionals, will adapt to the new way of doing business. And it's new right now. 6 months from now, it's not going to be new. So right. It's going to be the day-to-day that we're used to.
Well, it's no different whenever I started my real estate career basically right as COVID was coming through. But from what I understand, interviewing other agents that were realtors and agents before and during COVID, and still are realtors, is that there's not a whole lot of difference between what happened pre-COVID. You had changes that you had to take care. You had to, you couldn't meet in person. You had to wear a mask. You had to wipe everything down. You had policy changes. You had changes, right? Is this safe to say that, it's kind of very similar, and then, like you said, here in 6 months to a year, it's going to calm down? Or is this kind of a, expecting a change every couple of years in the real estate market now?
Well, it's market volatility, and you see it in the stock market, you see it in the real estate market, you see it in life. Everybody's either in a crisis, coming out of a crisis, or going into a crisis. Well, This is not a crisis, but it is a change. And change is just going to be the norm. And even what we are experiencing now with the Sitzer Burnett case and the repercussions from the settlement of how we have to make these changes to our business, big deal. Next year there will be a new change. And if you can't hack it, then maybe you shouldn't be in the business. But it's going to be okay, and it's going to bring a level of professionalism to the business that has been lost in some regards, because for so long, and I'm not necessarily an advocate of this change. There are things about it I deeply disagree with. There are things about the case I disagree with, and the protocol we have to do that I don't necessarily think are necessary. They don't care what I think, but some of the positives of it, you can't change it. Look for the positives. The positives are going to be that the professionalism demonstrated, the transparency demonstrated by real estate brokers is going to be way better than it was before the settlement, because no longer is it going to be you're an order taker. I'm doing you a favor by calling you to come have you show me this property. Mr. Broker, stop what you're doing now, come show it to me, tell me what I want, maybe I'll use you, maybe I won't. If they want to engage something as valuable, in my opinion, as buyer broker services, if the customer does, then they're going to need to set an appointment. And then on the flip side, that buyer's broker needs to be enough of a professional to be able to answer the questions, offer their services, and show a value proposition to that customer that ensures them that by signing an agency agreement with them, that they're going to be taken care of. So there's a silver lining there. That's a win-win.
I'm, and like you said about me earlier, and I appreciate it. I've been basically acting, all this, these mandated changes I've been practicing since I started real estate. So, I'm kind of excited to see, how this is going to progress. It's going to make people better. I feel that for sure. Kind of to segue in, we talked about, the buyer's side, kind of what that looks like for buyers representations and the buyers we represent, and then also a little bit on the agents and how it's going to affect us as a whole. But what about the sellers? Isn't that kind of what started this whole, settlement, NAR, all this rule change? Did it start with this, from a seller? Is that how it all happened, or?
Well, to me, it sounded like it was lawyers looking to win a settlement, and as far as what it looked like to me. But yes, the basis of it was to say, from the seller standpoint, that why am I having to pay a buyer's broker who is negotiating against me? And the refute I would have to that is commissions have always been negotiable. Commissions are negotiable, nothing's set. Commissions have always been negotiable. But this is going to make it very, very clear to all parties involved that there is not a standard commission amount that's charged by any given brokerage, and there's not a standard policy and procedure that seller has to do to procure buyers. They don't have to do that. The listing agreement is going to clearly state that they don't have to offer compensations to that buyer's broker.
So with that being said, do you see commissions across the board? If you look at national statistics, the average is, let's just say 6%, listing, right? Is that going to change? Do you see commissions, declining because more people are aware that they're negotiable? They say, you know what, we don't want to offer buyers compensation. So do you see those listing agreements as far as, listing of properties? We know we can't advertise them, at least on the MLS. But when they call or at a third-party website or whatever, do you see commissions coming down?
Time will tell, and I don't have the crystal ball on that. You just don't know. The thing about Arkansas, the thing about real estate in general is every market's local, and so how it impacts fees in Jonesboro, Arkansas, versus Little Rock versus Nashville, Tennessee, or Tampa, Florida, could drastically be different. And the trends and the norms that agencies and brokers offer for their services could be different on a state by state level. Whereas here, our average sales price in Jonesboro, Arkansas is just a little north of $200,000. So I don't know what'll happen down the road as far as the average fees that are charged. And that's totally up to each individual broker to negotiate with their client. So we just don't know. But I would assume that, for agents to be productive, for them to be incentivized to work, for them to make a living, maybe it'll stay close to or the same. We just don't know. Now you go into a market where you've got an average $1 million ticket price, average $1 million sales price, it may change, and there may be hourly fees, retainer fees for buyer broker services. Sellers may charge more, sellers agents may charge more, they may charge less. We just don't know. So it could go either direction. The government's intent, and I think the lawsuit's intent, was to drive down fees, but the free market does that, and the free market is what sets fees. Also, the value provided. If I'm providing value, people are willing to pay for that value. If I'm not providing value, they're not going to pay for that value. If they want to pay a broker in New York, $50 a door for every house they show, and they want to do that, they're free to do that. But for the value that we provide as a full service broker, which we can provide a list of 200 different things that we do, from contract to closing, for a buyer, for a seller, from one way to the other, if they want to pay for that, then we can charge X amount, and we can negotiate that and agree to that fee.
So it seems to me it's all about what value you bring, your value proposition, whether you're the buyer side, the seller side, whatever that is, to be able to, and not only that, to be able to articulate that. For sure.
Yeah, and it's salesmanship on one end. I've got to be able to. If you're a seller and you call me and you want me to list a house for you to sell it, I've always went to you and offered a listing presentation. So it's flipped over to the buyer side. If I'm a buyer client and I'm moving into Mountain Home, Arkansas, or I'm moving into Fayetteville or Jonesboro, and I want to hire an agent to represent me to locate a property in that area, I'm going to have, and that's a great thing that Coldwell Bankers provided. They provided all these tools on the backside of their website that basically highlights the services that we provide through our brokerage, through the brand, and it educates that buyer that from one end to the other on the contract closing process and the value that we provide in doing that.
Well, that's some good stuff. Yeah. Okay. Well, Kevin, one last piece of advice before we sign off here. I know your time is valuable and you need to get back to it. If you could have one piece of advice to an aspiring agent out there, I know you meet, you have several come in, or a few come in once a week, or for every week, come to interview with you. Somebody want to get into real estate. What's one piece of advice that you would give them?
First, I don't know if I talk too much to give one piece of advice, Zach. I'm sorry.
You got me crying here.
But first and foremost, you have to believe in the business. All right. So if you don't believe in the value of what you're selling to your seller or to your buyer, if you just think you're in here to make some quick money, then don't hang your license with me. Please don't get into this business, because it's way too important of a business to get into to not believe in the value that you provide to the client. That's probably number one. If you want to get in and you want to make a difference, you want to help people, you want to have an unbelievable career with no limit on your income ever, and something new and different and fun to do every day, that also will turn your hair gray like mine, and keep you up at night worrying about turn your beard gray for you. And so you can do that, and you can enjoy it, and you can have a great life and a great career. But if you don't believe that what we do as brokers is important and that it's valuable, you shouldn't be in the business. Number two is, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. It's not a get rich quick scheme. If you're willing to get in and aspire to be great, that takes time. And if you'll be consistent and consistently learn, come into the office and learn and spend time with and work with successful people, what works for them will usually work for you. And you may have your own version of how you do it, but you've got to come in and you've got to learn and you've got to be consistent and you can't give up easily. And if you give up easily, you're probably not going to make it in this business, so that's as short as I can keep.
Great words from the great Kevin Kercheval right there. Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate that. And guys, if you are interested in some more information on anything real estate related, this is Real Estate Revealed. Again, hit that like and share button, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Until next week.